Hey, welcome to the conversation. I'm Andy Mason, and you're listening to the Heaven in Business podcast. It's all around the messy intersection of faith, family, and business. And if you're new to this, there's a whole lot more on heaveninbusiness.com. But we've been at this journey for so long, we just know that nothing seems to go as planned and everything seems to go as planned. It's kind of this messy intersection of everything. How do I navigate family, faith, business growth, influence, relationships, and all of those things together? This session or this episode, I'm actually going to read you a story. Well, not a story. It's actually a chapter out of our new book, Listen Up, Hearing God at Work. This has been, we say it took a few months to write, but actually it's been 40 years in the making. You can find out more on Amazon. You can find it different places, but we've launched the audiobook. So you can get a copy of that. Now, it's not going to be my voice like I'm going to read you today. It's actually, I'm going to leave it to you to check it out. You can see the link below. That is out. It's live. It's happening. And I look forward to your feedback from that. And so I'm going to read you a chapter because as I was going through and editing this just yesterday, it really impacted me again. Why? Because very recently, we've actually had the pleasure of being around a guy by the name of Larry Randolph and Will Hart, Will Hart of Iris Ministries. Larry Randolph is a prophetic minister. He's been around for a very long time and seasoned. I love it. People that are seasoned, that have walked with God for a long period of time, and they're still walking with God. He's in his 70s. And he was sharing a message from John 21 about tipping points, tying that into Joshua 1. And now it's time. Moses is dead. Joshua 1:1, this is around that. Moses, my servant, is dead. Now you cross over the Jordan, a line of limitations that you've set upon yourself. Why is that important for me? Because that was actually one of the verses that God spoke to us when we left New Zealand and came to the States. It set us on a new trajectory because there was no way that we were thinking about ever leaving New Zealand. Our line of limitations was a geographic line. And then we've just been through the same thing again. Never thought we would leave Pennsylvania. And now we're in Tennessee. And by the way, it is beautiful here. I love it. The friends, the beauty, all that's going on. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. And I love the people. And man, we just found the best burger place in all of the world. So check it out. That's a separate story. Burger Up. Shout out to you. You're welcome. So I'm going to read to you from the book, Listen Up, Hearing God at Work. There's a whole heap here. There's some really, really cool things. I'm wishing that I had this 20 years ago. Seriously, it's not just the theory, it's the practical. There's case studies that will help you in your work, in your day-to-day. But this is chapter 5, case study, hearing God and breaking free of limitations. Sometimes God speaks to us about change, but our existing grid of understanding is limited, so we cannot grasp what he is leading us into. In this case study, we unlock a story of sensing God speak about change, wrestling through what that meant, and finally stepping into a new world of opportunity. Once again, pay attention to how God spoke or led, what we did to position ourselves to hear, and what was involved or required to follow his voice into new opportunities. As you do this, consider the decisions that you are facing yourself and how this could apply to listening to what God is saying. What was the situation? In 2008, Andy felt unsettled in his work and life roles. That's me. That's talking about. So this is Janine's voice, but this is a story about me. We lived in beautiful Hawke's Bay, New Zealand. Hey, and we're actually heading back to New Zealand in March of next year, 2025. We've got a workshop coming up in Taupo, New Zealand. It's one day, and a retreat for about 10 couples or individuals in Queenstown around the 23rd, 24th, and 25th. It's going to be outstanding. Check the heaveninbusiness.com website for that. That was just a segue. We lived in the beautiful Hawke's Bay of New Zealand, and Andy worked as a relationship manager with a large agricultural bank. It was an excellent job with great benefits, but Andy felt restless. I'd been like 7 years in that role. Janine also sensed that we were about to enter a season of change. We were involved in a strong local church. Pastor Mike Connell, shout out to you, outstanding church. From discipleship to board governance to missions, and yes, I did lead worship as well. We had a close, trusted community and family nearby. I just started doing adventure running, races, and sports. I loved it. It was so beautiful. There was no external reason why we should feel unsettled at all. What was God saying? However, we sensed that something was about to change. We just didn't know what. With all our church ministry and mission involvement, we wondered if that was where God was leading. So Andy went to our senior pastor and said, our heart is to do more, and God is talking to us about change. We are openly included in the leadership succession plan. There were 5 couples involved there. Before we explore alternative options, is your plan to offer us a staff role? Great open question. His immediate answer was no, nothing is going to change here for at least 3 years. While that was a surprise, it was also very clearly a closed door. That's a gift. So where else could God be leading? At the same time, an opportunity came up in Andy's work that he could involve a promotion into a new regional management role. Andy applied, was interviewed, and got the position. However, as the new role and responsibilities became clearer, Andy realized the travel would compete with family and ministry commitments, and it didn't make sense. God was stirring change, but the 2 obvious options were either impossible or an apparent diversion from our calling and assignment. It's not a ministry expansion. It's not a business increase. So what is it, God? What are you saying? Now, you might be in the same situation now, and I just encourage you to follow through the same simple format. It's a guide. It's not a script. It's a guide. These questions: what's your situation? What's God saying? As in, what are you hearing? What does it mean? What does wise counsel add? And then what will you do? So follow this simple process and format that we laid out here. Note, God is not our servant. I'm just going to say that again. God is not my servant. We serve at his pleasure. We are his. We serve at his pleasure. While we would love to have him answer us in the moment, he does what he chooses every single time. I've heard it said that God is never late, but he misses an awful lot of opportunities to be early. And often we don't know why. This tests our hearts, and if we are willing to ask and keep asking and yielding to his timing and answer, we will have a response. The wait is worth it. Andy went on a mission trip to Uganda about a month later with a close friend. Shout out to you, Bryden. That was amazing. What we got to do in Uganda, microfinance, orphan program, leadership development with John Wandera in Mbale, Mbuzia. It was outstanding. I was the one that learned the most. Anyway, this was the 5th trip to that nation, and the local organization had successfully implemented leadership development, an operational microfinance project, and a working orphan care program. In reviewing progress, Andy sensed God was saying, your work here is finished. Andy processed what he heard from God with his friend, and talked about the sense of change back home, including the lack of clarity in both ministry and workplace. Andy's friend said as they spoke, have you asked God if he is leading you to a different geographic place? Now that was a new thought. Thank you, Brighton. We never imagined that we would move geographically from where we lived in New Zealand. Within 10 minutes, we had grandparents who were eager, trusted babysitters for our 4 small children. We had another set of grandparents less than 2 hours away. We had close friends, a strong community, and a growing influence in our city and nation. We had a dream house with 0 debt. We had no plans to move in the foreseeable future. The thought of moving geographically from the most beautiful place on earth was entirely beyond our self-imposed line of limitation. Can you see that? That's the point. Don't get irritated by me saying New Zealand's the most beautiful nation on the earth. It kind of is. There are pockets of beauty in America, in Alaska, in Russia, all over. But New Zealand as a nation is stunning. Come with us. Check out heavenandbusiness.com. Join us. Taupo next year in Queenstown. I'm teasing. I had a self-imposed line of limitation. Often we don't even know what we don't know until we experience something different or someone shows us. But God's perspective is way bigger than ours. He will lead you beyond the limitation on yourself, your company, and your ministry, beyond possible, if you will listen. When Eddie got home from the trip, he wrote a prayer in his journal. God, is our future in this location? A couple of days later, Andy was reading a bedtime story from an illustrated Bible to our 4-year-old son, Ben. Ben always chose adventures like David and Goliath or Daniel in the lion's den. This evening, Ben chose a different story. It was the story of Abraham from Genesis 12. Andy read out loud, "Get out of your country, from your family, to the land I am showing you." Andy paused, and I could feel that again, just like, oh. Andy paused, somewhat shocked, because it was like he was reading the voice of God to himself. Could God speak through a children's Bible? We had a visiting speaker for a midweek meeting at our local church 2 days later. He opened the Bible to Joshua chapter 1 and began to read, paraphrase, "Now arise, you and these people with you, and cross over the river Jordan into the land of risk and promise." Andy sat bolt upright, suddenly paying a lot more attention. The speaker unpacked how the River Jordan had been the line of limitations set for the Israelites for 40 years as they walked in circles in the desert. But now the season had changed, and they needed to cross over their line of limitations to step into what God had for them next. In his journal, Andy wrote, "Here's our future in this location." Within 4 days, he had heard God say twice, "Leave your current location and limitations and go to a new location." And didn't know he had an internal line of limitations a few weeks earlier. "I'm not leaving this geographic location. Why would anyone leave this beautiful, comfortable, fully provisioned location?" Now God was saying, let go, cross over, leave, move. Please note, when making big decisions, never decide alone, especially if you're in a covenant marriage relationship. God had spoken to Andy, but what about Janine? The following weekend, Janine walked around home and said in a silent prayer, "God, you've spoken to Andy, but I need to hear from you also. What are you saying to me?" Before she could finish praying, a thought popped in her head, Jeremiah 3:14. Now, do you know what Jeremiah 3:14 says? I agree. None of us know. It's not one of the ones you remember. Like, is there even a verse? So she literally looked it up, sat down, and read it out. And it says this: "I will take you, one from a city and two from a family, and I will bring you to Zion, and I'll set shepherds over you according to my heart, who will feed you with knowledge and understanding." She simply started to weep as she didn't just hear the words, she felt the Spirit of God moving. What does it mean? We knew God said, leave your location and go to a new geographic location, but he hadn't said where to or when. As we processed this together, we read back over the scriptures, and very clearly Joshua 1:1 says, now. So we did know the timing. It was now. But where to, God? Note that the process of hearing God is not fixed or finite. Hearing God is about intimacy, not instruction. It's about an ongoing dialogue and relationship with him that invites you closer to truly knowing him, his word, his ways, his nature, and his name. John 17:3, "And this is eternal life, that they may know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom you have sent." So as a couple, we prayed and processed together. That involved talking and asking one another, if you could go anywhere, where would you go? What about this country? Why would you go there? We interacted with what God said, and we asked more questions. We were leaning in to hear what else he had to say. We were looking for an internal witness or a "that's it" from one another. Notice here how some of the things we learned in previous chapters, well, you have to get the book for that. What you read in previous chapters are now coming up here. How do you know God's speaking? His word releases life. That's John 6:63. His word releases peace, Colossians 3:15. And his word is impossible to ignore. It's like a burning fire in our bones. That's in Jeremiah. Over the next 2 weeks, we continued praying, processing, and asking where. Janine remembered a conference we had attended in Auckland where the ministry of a pastor from California had significantly impacted us. Actually, I remember that. I was sitting there, and this guy that we'd never heard of before, Bill Johnson, would be opening up scripture and reading scripture, and I'm like, why am I weeping as I'm listening to this guy? Now I know that's just the presence of God. If you've never sat under the ministry of Bill Johnson, just go there, be a part of that. It's astounding, just the wisdom and the revelation, and literally as you listen what God speaks. I had a CPA, not a CPA, CFO of a company in Kansas, come to a meeting that I set up with Bill, and this CFO had never heard of him before, and he's like, oh my gosh, it's an hour long session. It better be good. And I'm thinking, oh no, here we go. At the end of it, he's like, I hope that was recorded. You're so impacted by just sitting there as Bill's talking. It's just carry such an anointing and a peace. His name is Bill Johnson. He had mentioned that their church was also a ministry school. Suddenly Janine said, what if we went to where Bill Johnson is in California? As she said that, it was like fireworks going off between us. California was never part of our plan, and attending ministry did not register as on our dream list. This was a long way across our line of limitations, but we sensed this is God. Next question. What does wise counsel add? Our understanding is that God was saying to leave New Zealand, go to Redding, California, and attend a ministry school. And the timing was now. Doing some quick research, the ministry school started in a few months. We needed to run this by wise counsel to test what we heard and add clarity and confirmation. One of the people we spoke to was a mature and trusted prophetic leader. Thanks, Lynn. We told her God was leading us into something significant, but we withheld all other details. She's like, can you tell me more? Like, no, you go and ask Jesus. We asked her to pray and return to us with what she heard. 3 days later, Lynn returned to us saying, I was praying for you and sensed that you're going to make a big move, that it is now, and that you're going to sit under an apostolic leader like Bill Johnson. Boom. Confirmation number one. Given the move's significance and how scared Andy was. Seriously, I was terrified. We sought the counsel of 5 different mature and trusted people. Every single one of them confirmed the decision, timing, and location. This is God. You've got to go for it. Next question. So often we get to this point and it's like, God spoke. No. What are you going to do? What's the next step? What will you do? Now we needed to act on what we were hearing. So many details had been organized, from applying and being accepted for the ministry school to putting in Andy's resignation at work, sorting out visas, putting our possessions into storage, renting out our house, finding accommodation in schools for all the kids in California. Well, us and the kids. Saying goodbye to family and friends, all in 6 weeks. With 10 suitcases, 4 children, aged 2 to 8 years old, and a lot of uncertainty, we left small town New Zealand, crossed our line of limitations, and landed in the United States of America. We had an obvious word from God, confirmed by all our wise counsel. We had a lot of unknowing to navigate and a lot of trust in God to learn, and God proved faithful. Proverbs 35, every word of the Lord is tested and refined and proven to be true. We love the proven to be true. We don't like the tested and refined. Since crossing our line of limitations, we've discovered a new world of partnering with God. We survived 3 years with no income. We won the Diversity Immigrant Visa Program to fast-track USA green cards and became citizens. And that flag up there got given as a friend. It was flown over the Capitol the day we became citizens. Pretty cool. Thanks, Brad. We overcame debilitating health conditions. We launched leadership development and coaching programs. We bought and sold houses. We faced fear and lack. We navigated wildfires, the car fire that burned 200,000 acres, including right around our house, but not the house, in Redding, California. Snowmageddon, which was that 3 months later. We saw physical and financial miracles. We made new friends all over the world, from Russia to Singapore to Guatemala to Zimbabwe. We started a movement connecting, training, and activating people to partner with God in all of life. That's heavenandbusiness.com if you haven't checked it out yet. We got to write this book with you in mind. What's the point? Now we can look back and say, oh, it was obvious that God was speaking. But at the time, it required faith. Faith to navigate the uncertainty and the unknown. Faith to cross the line of limitations we had set for ourselves. How did it start? We asked a question. We didn't even know what question to ask, but we had a friend, Bryden, a wise counselor, who gave us a different perspective and a question to pray about. Is your future in this location? So what about you? What did you observe as you read this small part of our story? How did we hear God speaking? What did we do to position ourselves to hear? How did we continue to understand what God said, even when it didn't make sense? How did our line of limitations blind us? What was needed to see and hear beyond our no-go zone? Pause for a moment and ask, Jesus, are there any lines of limitation that I or others have set for myself? What is the future that you have planned for me? How can I cross over my line of limitations and step into the land of risk and promise you are inviting me into? Now it goes on in that chapter to an activation. It walks through, things to note and things to apply. Each chapter's got that in there. You can get a hold of that on Amazon all over the world. There's now an Audible version that you can find. I'll post the link down below for that. But I just pray for you. The greatest gift, actually, I've wrote it in here, is, following Jesus is ridiculous. There is no God like him. Jesus is God. There is no God like him. The Son of God who paid the full price, not for a workforce, but for a family. This is Psalm 116, 1-2, the Passion. I am passionately in love with God because he listens to me. He hears my prayers and answers them. We've got a God that hears and answers. As long as I live, I'll keep praying to him, for he stoops down to listen to my heart's cry. So if you're listening, watching, reading this, I just bless you. I bless you with eyes to see and ears to hear. I just release the Spirit of God to touch you right now. That's the thing that you are feeling right now that you cannot explain. It goes beyond logic because it's the spirit realm. It cannot be, it can be perceived, but can't be grasped. It's like frustrating. It requires faith, but he's touching you right now. So I pray the presence of God to flood you, that he heals your body. People right now being physically healed. I pray that he awakens you morning by morning to know a word that sustains the weary, that you cry out to him, and he is the God who hears and answers and stoops down to hears your heart's cry. And I pray that he awakens in you a dream, a desire for what he has created you for, that you are born with purpose and significance. And I bless you. We're going to continue to grow week by week. We're going to equip, train you so that you partner with God at work and engage in the messy intersection of faith, family, and business. If you think it to be all pretty and calm, you're in the wrong camp, because my Bible says the only stall that's empty is one that has no cattle, as in it's not getting anything done. But where there's work being done, it's messy. So if you're surrounded by clean, quiet, calm, and everything in order, be careful. You're probably in the wrong place. But if you've got mess around you, as long as you're not creating it, you're welcome. Welcome to the rest of life that we get to see and expand the kingdom of God. Hey, from here, grab a copy of the book. Make sure you check out the upcoming conference. We are going to be in Atlanta, Georgia, at the end of February. We've got John Bevere. We've got with us Joe Moody, Jonathan Kira Sparks, Paul Van Hosen, Jen Jackson, and a bunch of workshops. So you're going to get lit up with what's possible with God in your place of work, but you're also going to be connected to other business people from all over the world. Last year, there was a group there from Brazil. As a result of that, we went to Brazil. And it's just so fun to see the connections, the relationships, the business, the clarity, the insight, the peace, and the power of God touching your life. So if you want more of that, make sure that you check it out, register, and we will see you there.